They say that in the most remote mountains of the world, there is a monastery that does not appear on any map, where the silence is so deep that the sound of the wind seems to whisper forgotten words. It was there, according to ancient accounts, that a manuscript of unknown origin was kept under the guardianship of monks and priests for centuries. It was not an ordinary book. The pages, made of a material that did not deteriorate over time, contained symbols that subtly changed shape as if they were breathing. Those who had the rare opportunity to see it claimed that by staring at the symbols long enough, images and voices would emerge directly in the mind, as if the book were alive. Legend has it that its content is so profound and unsettling that it was hidden from most of humanity for millennia. Not because it was dangerous in a physical sense, but because it could completely shatter the way we perceive life, and above all, death. It describes in rich detail what happens at the exact moment we cross the boundary between this world and the next. Not as a theory or belief, but as a precise map drawn by consciousnesses that had made this passage countless times. Throughout history, this manuscript has been given many names. In Tibetan temples, it was called the Manual of Transition, a guide to help the soul avoid becoming lost in the traps of the beyond. In ancient Egypt, some priests knew it as the Path of the Portals, as it described the dimensional passages every spirit must face. Among certain Western initiates, it was referred to as the Book of Passage, a sacred work that only a few could read, for each word carried the weight of a destiny. But there was a clear reason to keep such a work secret. The knowledge it contained could not only change the way we live, it could destroy it if used without preparation. Imagine knowing, with absolute certainty, that physical life is just a temporary stage, that what we call death is merely a transition. How many would still care about daily work, small struggles, the effort to build something in the material world? Without the proper balance, such a revelation could lead to obsession, an escape from reality, or even the desire to hasten one's existence to reach the realms described in its pages. The danger did not lie in the words, but in their interpretation. For this reason, for centuries, the book was studied only by spiritual masters who underwent rigorous initiation processes. These masters understood that truth cannot simply be thrown before an unprepared mind. The consciousness must be ready to absorb something so vast. The structure of the book is enigmatic. It is divided into three great journeys: the separation from the body, describing the exact moment when physical life ends and the soul begins to detach from earthly ties; the crossing of dimensions, where consciousness passes through portals, realms, and encounters that test its clarity and spiritual evolution; the return or dissolution, the final destination, returning to the physical world through reincarnation or merging completely with the all. Each chapter is written in symbolic language, full of metaphors and archetypal images. A single sentence could hide multiple layers of meaning, and only someone trained in the art of spiritual interpretation could decipher it. The same passage could mean something entirely different to two readers, depending on their level of awareness. But perhaps the most intriguing point of all is what the book describes as the first glimpse of truth. The text says, "At the instant the heart stops, the true book opens for the soul." And that is when everything begins. This means that the work is not merely a physical object. The manuscript kept in the monastery is an imperfect copy of the original, which exists in another dimension. It cannot be accessed by hands, but only by consciousness. And everyone, without exception, will have access to it one day, at the very moment of death. This detail changes everything. It means the book is not the privilege of monks or initiates, but of all humanity. However, what each person can understand from its pages will depend entirely on how they lived. Those who cultivated clarity compassion, and courage will see its pages as a luminous map. Those who lived in selfishness, fear, and illusion will see only a tangled confusion, unable to follow the path. Thus, the first great lesson of the mysterious book is silent but powerful. The true study does not begin with reading its pages, but with the life you lead before touching them. And it is at this point that the story enters dangerous territory, for understanding that your destiny is being written with every act, thought, and feeling is a revelation few have the courage to face. The final instant. For those watching from the outside, it may be nothing more than the last breath, a silence settling in, and a body that no longer moves. But for the one living the experience from within, it is something entirely different. The book describes that, in that moment, time begins to slow down in a way that is impossible to measure. The sounds of the physical world become distant, muffled, as if coming from another room. Pain, if there was any, dissolves. Breathing is no longer necessary. There is an instant of strangeness, as if the mind is trying to understand why the body is not responding. And then slowly, perception begins to expand. Little by little, consciousness drifts away from the physical body, as if being pulled upward or outward without effort. It is a paradoxical sensation, absolute lightness, and at the same time, an irresistible force leading it onward. The book describes that at this stage, many still try to cling to their body, like someone unwilling to let go of the edge of a cliff, but the invisible current keeps carrying them, whether they wish it or not. Then comes the panoramic vision of life. In a matter of seconds, or perhaps outside any measure of time, everything that was lived is revealed before the soul. It is not like remembering photographs or videos, but like being there again. Every conversation, every moment of joy, every pain caused or endured, all manifest with complete intensity. The difference now is that it is no longer experienced from only one's own perspective. The book states that consciousness also feels the impact of its actions on others. If you made someone smile, you feel the joy you caused. If you hurt someone, you feel the weight of the pain you provoked. There is no way to hide anything, not because someone is judging, but because the very being stands before its own naked truth. It is in this setting that a deep sound begins to emerge. It does not come from any specific place, but from all directions at once. The book describes it as an infinite Om, a deep vibration that is not only heard, but felt in the core of one's being. This frequency seems to call, as if it were the primordial voice of the universe saying, "Come." Along with this sound, an intense light opens on the horizon, or what could be called a horizon in this state. It is not the light of the sun nor a fire, but a living luminosity, as if it possessed consciousness. It does not hurt the eyes, but the soul feels its power. Many describe this light as pure love. However, not all have the courage to follow it. The book says that some, dominated by fear, attachment to material life, or the belief that they do not deserve to enter, turn their gaze away and search for another path. And this is where the temptation to stay arises. Some spirits, confused or resistant, choose to remain close to the physical world. They visit places they loved, try to communicate with dear ones, and stay tied to the dramas they once lived. But as the book warns, this is the first portal, the first crucial choice of the journey. Remaining bound to the earthly plane means being surrounded by shadows and echoes, unable to move forward into higher dimensions. It is a limbo made of memories, longing, and regrets. The manuscript is clear. Attachment is the greatest obstacle for the newly freed soul. Those who cannot release it wander in circles until, at last, they accept to move on. But those who choose the light and surrender to the primordial sound cross the first transition and begin their journey through the invisible realms. In the cosmic silence that follows, The soul understands, if only faintly, that it has taken the first step beyond the life it once knew. And what comes next is even more mysterious. As soon as the soul crosses the first portal, the book describes it entering a corridor of transition, a space that belongs neither to the physical world nor entirely to the spiritual. The sensation is one of constant movement, as if carried by an invisible current. This corridor can appear in different forms. For some, it is like a golden tunnel bathed in light. For others, a dark path illuminated only by distant points of brightness. Along this journey, familiar presences may appear. It could be the face of a deceased relative, a dear friend, or even an animal once loved in life. These presences are not only there for comfort, but also to guide. However, the book warns that not all familiar forms are genuine. Some may be mental creations of the soul itself, or illusions projected by forces seeking to lead it astray. For this reason, one must feel more than see to recognize who is truly there to help. After this initial passage, the path opens into three initial realms that every soul must cross. The realm of shadows. Here, everything repressed during life comes to the surface. Fears, guilt, anger, and traumas take shape and become as real as they were in the physical world, perhaps even more so. It is a territory where the mind itself creates the landscape. For those who lived with a clear conscience and a light heart, this stage can be brief. For those who carried heaviness and resentment, it may seem endless. The book explains that there are no external guardians here. The only challenge is to face and transcend oneself. The realm of voices. Once the darkness is overcome, the soul arrives in a place filled with sounds, whispers, chants, laughter, and cries, all coming from different directions. The book says these voices are spiritual entities trying to communicate. Some offer guidance and protection, while others simply confuse or mislead the traveler. It is a test of discernment to recognize which voices lead to truth and which are merely empty echoes. Many become lost here, following familiar sounds that lead them back to the realm of shadows, the realm of harmony. For those who pass through the shadows and cross the sea of voices, a space of profound peace appears. The light here is gentle, and the air seems to vibrate with a silent melody. There is no haste, fear, or anxiety. The soul feels it is preparing for something important. This is the place where it purifies and strengthens itself before facing the next step, the judgment. But the judgment described in the book is not an external tribunal. There is no judge seated before the soul, no angels or gods pointing out mistakes and virtues. What happened is far more intimate. The soul's own consciousness places itself before an absolute mirror. In it, everything that was lived appears with crystalline clarity, not just the events, but the intention behind each act. It does not matter if something seemed right in the eyes of the world. What matters here is the inner truth. In this mirror, the soul cannot lie to itself. Every action, intention, and emotion is weighed on the scale of its own heart. It is a moment of total revelation, in which the soul understands exactly who it has become over the course of its existence. And then comes the choice. The book recounts that after the judgment, three paths open: to advance toward the light, moving on to even higher dimensions, where individuality begins to dissolve into universal consciousness; to reincarnate, returning to the physical world to correct mistakes, complete unfinished tasks, or continue evolving; to merge completely with the all, abandoning all identities and becoming an indivisible part of the creative source. The decision is imposed by no one. It is the soul itself that chooses, but the choice is shaped by its level of evolution. Souls deeply attached to the material tend to return. Those already detached from all things choose the fusion. Thus ends the passage through the first three realms, a path which, according to the book, is only the preparation for even deeper mysteries, reserved for those who dare to go beyond existence itself. Not every soul that reaches the end of the passage chooses to remain in the spiritual realms. Some, out of compassion or duty, decide to return. The book calls these souls the ones who come back. They return to the physical body to fulfill a mission, correct mistakes, or complete something left unfinished. These returns are not always voluntary. Sometimes the soul itself is advised by spiritual guides to go back, for there are important lessons still to be learned. The book describes returning as a profound shock. The consciousness, once free, unlimited, and expanded, suddenly finds itself confined again within a fragile, heavy, vulnerable body. The wide vision of the spirit contracts into the narrow perception of human senses. It is like stepping into a small room after having flown across an endless horizon. Many who experience this speak of an immense longing for the peace they felt, and of an unshakable certainty that death is not the end. As for those who do not return, they move toward an even more mysterious destiny, merging with the divine. The book describes this moment as entering a sea of pure consciousness, where there are no borders, no names, no stories. Everything one once was, memories, traits of personality, desires, and even the very notion of self, gently dissolves into the luminous vastness. It is not an erasure, but an absolute expansion. There is no longer a separate identity. There is no longer you and the all, only unity. The soul understands that it has always been part of the source, but now it is fully aware of it. It is the return to the origin, to the home that was never truly lost, only forgotten. And then the book reveals its final secret. Death is not the end, but merely a change of state. What you carry with you are not riches, titles, or possessions, only what you have become. According to the monks who guarded the manuscript, this phrase is the key to understanding the entire journey. It means that the true purpose of life is not to accumulate, but to transform. Every act of compassion, every gesture of love, every moment of courage, all of this shapes who you are in the instant you cross the final portal. The book ends with a silent warning. The book of passage does not begin at the moment of death. It is being written now in this very instant, with every thought you nurture, every word you speak, and every action you take. When the time comes, you will be both the reader and the author of your own story. If you have listened this far, you already know. The life you are living is the preparation for the greatest encounter of all, the encounter with yourself. The question is, what are you writing today in the invisible pages of your book of passage? If this reflection touched you, subscribe and activate the notification bell. Here we uncover together the mysteries of life, death, and consciousness. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that every day is an opportunity to become something greater. Because in the end, what you carry with you is only what you have become.